Welcome back to the Own Your Good podcast. My name is Dave, and just as a quick recap, I've done a few of these episodes, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understands what it is that I'm trying to accomplish here. I want to help people own their good, figure out their hobbies, their talents, the things that make them happy to be alive and excited to wake up in the morning, or something that helps them feel valuable. Today I'm with popular Utah author that I'm super excited to talk to. His name is Robison Wells, and I have some questions. Obviously, that's the purpose of the podcast. But go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, where you're from, all of those things.
I am a Utah native, born and bred in Salt Lake City. Grew up there, did a brief stint in New Mexico, lived there, loved it. I'm an author, and I've published 15 novels, but I think 6 of them are set in New Mexico, just because I love it so much down there. But yeah, I'm an author. Got published in 2004, right when I was graduating college, and then when I finished, that was with a small press, and then when I finished grad school, it was during the Great Recession, and couldn't find a job, and ended up writing my first national novel that sold to HarperCollins, and from then on I've been a national author and gone on to publish in lots of languages and have pretty good success. And in my day job, I am a writer. I have a full-time job with a marketing agency where I write, which I love, and I have 2 side gigs, one of which is kind of a social media job, and then the other is also a writer, a freelance writer for a tech company. Both great jobs that I really enjoy doing, and as much writing as I can get in, I can take. So that's about me.
That's awesome. So just as out of curiosity, what did you go to school for? What was your degree in college?
My undergrad degree was in political science and history.
Okay.
The intent was to go into history, but I didn't want to have to learn a language.
Yeah.
And I found that I could take all the same classes, but without a language. But I had to take a couple of quantitative analysis classes, which was fine because I like math. So I took some stats classes and some sociology classes that dealt with demographics and survey writing. And so I got a BS in political science with a minor in history. And then went back to grad school and got an MBA in marketing.
Okay. So a lot of experience writing. I think history and marketing are the places where there's probably, maybe not as much as English, but there's a lot of writing still.
Right.
What was that like? I mean, because I think a lot of people who think that they want to be a writer or an author in any regard, what was that experience like? Because I think a lot of people are English majors or something like that when they're wanting to be published, right?
Right.
When did you want to be a writer, I guess, is the origin question. When did that hit?
It hit halfway through school. I was studying history. I had an idea for a book, and I had no desire to be a writer. All through high school, I hated English class. Yeah. I mean, I actively hated English class. I got C's and D's in English class in high school.
Yeah.
And halfway through college, I was reading an history textbook about the Battle of Stalingrad, and there was just this interesting story that they were telling about how Stalingrad, if you know, was a very brutal battle that just devastated this city of Stalingrad, and there were like 1.5 million deaths, and it lasted for over a year, just fighting over yards of territory. And soldiers were so afraid of leaving their cover to get from one building to another that they started burrowing from basement to basement.
Wow.
And I thought this is such an interesting idea that I went to my brother, who at the time he was an English major, he was an editing emphasis major. He had always wanted to be a writer. I think that's why I didn't want to be a writer in high school, is that I didn't want to be in his shadow.
Yeah.
But I went to him and I said, hey, I've got this idea for a book. You should write it. And he said, well, I'm writing something else. And now that I'm an author, I know that everybody comes to you with an idea
Yeah.
and says, "Hey, I've got an idea for a book. You should
Yeah.
write it." But he was nice about it, and he said, "I'm writing something else, but why don't you write a couple of chapters and come down to my writing group?" The writing group happened to be him, who has gone on to great success, New York Times bestseller, and then Brandon Sanderson,
Okay.
who has gone on to enormous, crazy success. But at the time, none of us were published. And over the course of the next year, I wrote a book that was terrible. It was really bad. It has been lost to old computers where I never transferred it over, so I have no idea where it exists, if it exists at all. But that's fine because it was bad. But I wrote a book, and I got through my 80,000 words, and I hit the end, and I had done it. I had written a book, and I was really, really pleased with how that turned out, and I kind of caught the bug from there on.
So I just want to point something out there. Who were you writing this book for, ultimately? Do you remember back then, was it I want to get published, or I just have this story I need to tell?
Back then it was, this is just a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never had any intent of getting it published. I didn't know anything about the publishing market. I didn't know anything about agents. I didn't know... This was 2002, and so the internet, there was no Twitter, there was no anything that would make it easy to connect with agents. It was still in the days where you would mail off your queries and with your self-addressed stamped envelope and wait for them to come back, and it was just not my thing, and I just never had any delusions that this book was going to go anywhere.
Yeah. So I guess for anybody that has a project or an idea to start a book or a story or any kind of project, what I'm hearing is if it's for you and if it's something that you just want to do and enjoy, whatever the end product is, that's the first step.
Yeah.
Is just doing it.
Yeah.
Have you used any elements from that story in other stories since then?
Not really. It was a World War I story, even though it was inspired by the Battle of Stalingrad, but it was based in World War I. And because everyone who I was writing with in the writing group was writing fantasy, it kind of evolved into kind of gunpowder fantasy.
Yeah.
And I have no interest in writing in the fantasy genre.
Yeah.
So it was fun to write, but not only do I not have interest in writing in the fantasy genre, I don't read a lot in the fantasy genre other than, the classics, Tolkien and whoever. But so I wouldn't know anywhere to go with the book, even if I did want to continue it on.
Interesting. So not like other people, you didn't know that you wanted to be a writer or had no desire to write. What did you think you wanted to do from high school to college, political science, in that area? What was your goal?
My goal was to work for the CIA. I had it all planned out. Going out of high school, I thought I was going to be an architect. Mm-hmm. And I started architecture school and enjoyed architecture a lot, but found that the process of becoming an architect was very long-term process with very low pay when you get out of it. It was kind of like going to as much school as being a doctor, but coming out of it with a $35,000 salary.
Yeah.
And so I nixed architecture and started getting involved in political science. And the big thing for me was I was at a community college, and in 2011, and 9/11 happened, and I was getting ready to go January of 2012, so just 4 months after the attacks. I was getting ready to go into University of Utah, and so I went into international studies, national security studies, with the goal of going on and getting a master's degree in security studies. That all changed when I sold my first book right before graduation. And I thought, well, hey, I've sold my first book, and now I've got it made in the shade. Now I'm an author forever and ever, and I don't need to pursue this any further. And little did I know that I had sold it to a small press and made maybe $5,000, and
you didn't realize how much more work was going to come after that.
I thought that I had reached the pinnacle of my goals and didn't know that there was so much more on the line. And then I went back to marketing afterward because I was the only job that you could get with a poli-sci degree is nothing. And so I ended up in a sales job and enjoyed certain aspects of sales enough that I wanted to get involved in marketing.
Yeah. So I think myself listening to this story, there was a while where I felt like I was sort of lost and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it sounds like your story in a lot of ways where it's, I think I want to do this, and you go in that direction and that's not quite right. And so you go in another direction and that's not quite right. And eventually you find the thing that, do you get a buzz from writing? Is that, you sort of mentioned that a little bit, you cut the bug.
Yeah. I do. I don't have as much time for writing for pleasure anymore.
Sure. Full-time work and taking care of family responsibilities.
Yeah. I still have hobbies, which I think we'll talk about later, but the fact that I write all day for all three of my side jobs, my 2 side jobs and my full-time job, the fact that I write all day for those, it's really hard for me Saturday morning to say, all right, we're going to come in and pound out 5,000 words of my story. I want to. I have a story that I love that is my favorite outline that I've ever had, and I'm 30,000 words into it, and I really love it. But it's just so hard to get the motivation to write for fun when writing is what I want to take a break from.
Yeah. When I was in college as an English major, I found that it was very difficult to transfer from nonfiction or analysis writing about something and then switching over to creative writing. Do you have any experience with that, or is it basically the same in your mind?
No, it's definitely the same. What I mainly write in marketing is commercial writing.
So there's still a lot of creativity there.
There's still a lot of creativity there because the majority of it is blog posts. Mm-hmm. I work for a marketing agency, so kind of like an advertising agency, except it's based on internet marketing.
Yeah.
And so it's all about search engine optimization, and I'll get a topic that I'm supposed to write about and have a bunch of keywords that I'm supposed to incorporate in it, and then given pretty much free reign to write whatever I want as long as I rank for those keywords.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of creativity that comes into it. There's no characters, there's no plot. It's more I can have fun with the writing in, like, for example, some of the clients that I've had, I have one that is a party planning website where they'll say, we need 9 ideas for Halloween parties. And I've got to come up with 9 ideas for creative Halloween parties. And so it gets a little bit of the creative juices flowing. Sure. And I have to come up with interesting ideas, but I'm not like creating a story and I don't get a pat on the back at the end of it. It's which is something that all authors want.
Sure.
So it's good and bad.
Yeah, and that's fascinating as a person going into English. People, like you say with political science, poli-sci, what are you going to do with that? This job didn't exist even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Being able to advertise or give creative ideas to a company is a pretty cool development, I guess, in the writing field.
Not only that, but I got my master's degree in marketing. I am coming into a marketing agency where I'm the oldest person there. I'm 42, and I am the oldest person in the company, with the exception of, I think, the chief financial officer.
Okay.
Everyone is brand new. The company is down in Lehigh, so everyone is graduates of Utah Valley University, and they graduated like 2 years ago, and they know so much more than I do. Because when I was graduating, I graduated in 2009, like I said, during the Great Recession, and digital marketing wasn't a thing. We never talked about internet marketing. We never talked about search engine optimization. We never talked about anything like that. I got a very much more classical education of strategy and game theory and brand management and all those things. And the job that I'm doing right now, I lucked into because I'm a writer, not because I'm a marketer.
Interesting. So the paths have crossed.
So
what is, for those that are curious, maybe want to be writers, and their parents or their friends are saying, that everybody's doing that, you can't do that. What would you say to that as a person who's published more than just a few times?
There is never a better time to be a writer than right now. I have published in multiple outlets. I published with a small press. That's where I started. Small press meaning books sold 2,500 to 5,000 copies.
And kind of regional?
Regional, they were only available in states nearby here. And then I published national with HarperCollins, so
do you think
had
that first
full influence in across the world, because it was published in so many languages. But then I self-published a book, and I could do whatever I wanted with that self-published book. And there are so many authors now. When I first started, self-publishing was a horrible stigma. If you self-published, it meant that you were a failure who could not hack it in the real market. You were it was vanity press. And now there are a ton of authors who make gobs of money self-publishing and putting out good books. And it's a different process that you go through. You still need editors. You still need... you don't need agents, but you still need editors. You still need cover designers. You still need book designers. But anyone who wants to be published can be published. And I would even go so far as to say, one thing that I have maintained since 2002 is a blog. And I know blogs are getting out of style now. I update my blog at least once every 2 weeks. And I find so much value in it, even though I know no one reads it. I find so much value in being able to publish my thoughts regularly and just lay things out that I wouldn't normally say, that I don't have enough space to say on Twitter. And there are so many avenues where you can get published.
That first publication, what did that do for your confidence in publishing?
Oh, I thought I had it made in the shade.
So knowing that you had done it once, you had no doubt that you could duplicate that process in some way.
I thought I have made it, and now my sales will only go up with every succeeding book. And things will continue on. And I published 3 books with the regional press. The first book sold about 5,000 copies. The second book sold about 2,500 copies, which I blame entirely on it had a horrible cover. And they didn't know what to do with it because I switched genres, which you're not supposed to do. My first book was a romantic comedy, and my second book was a suspense thriller. And they didn't know what to do with it to build off the brand that I had established.
So that's maybe one piece of advice. If you're going to write, stay in the same sort of area, the genre.
I mean, it's fun to experiment around and play around. Some people will publish in different genres under different names. Okay. For example, Dave Wolverton and Dave Farland are the same person, but one of them is his science fiction name and one of them is his fantasy name. So there's some people who do that. Other people, once they're established, can not gender bounce, but genre bounce a little bit more and jump from place to place. So yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but we just didn't handle it well.
Yeah.
And so on the cover of this thriller that is about nuclear proliferation and terrorists and kidnapping, it said a hilarious new adventure from the author of On Second Thought. And I thought, I'm not advertising it as a hilarious new adventure just because the other book was a romantic comedy. And so it sold poorly. But then the third book sold about 6,000 copies. But I realized at that point that, with the exception that it was paying for a couple of trips to Disneyland, it wasn't a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I needed something else to be a full-time job. And so that's when I went back to grad school. And then it was shortly after grad school that I made enough money that it actually was a full-time job for about 6 years, where I was publishing regularly and making good money. And
Awesome. So this whole process to me is fascinating, that writing is still something that you can do as a job. But I think, like anybody, if that is your full-time, what you do focus on all throughout the week, when you spend time working on a hobby or something that's for your own pleasure and fulfillment, it's difficult if it's that same type of thing.
Right.
So what else do you do when you just can't write, you can't think creative story anymore?
My main thing that I've gone to, and I've gone to for 25 years, is I paint miniatures. I got hooked in miniature wargaming when I was in the 8th grade. And very rarely was I interested in playing the games.
Yeah.
But I got interested in painting. And about 12 years ago, a little bit of background. I have schizophrenia.
Okay.
And I got really sick. And I was writing full time at the time. I was writing the sequel to Variant. And I was in a basement room of my house that was my office. And I started to hoard building supplies, spackle and extruded foam and box cutters and all these things. And I built this massive 4 foot by 4 foot Egyptian temple. And I did it. It was purely a mental illness breakdown that got me to do it. It was fun, and it was enjoyable, and I loved it, and I have great fondness for it. But it was me breaking down and losing my ability to write and finding a new outlet for my creativity.
Yeah. So did you start painting miniatures in 8th grade?
I did.
When it started.
That's when it started.
And for those that deal with mental illness in a lot of different forms, I'm more familiar with bipolar disorder and the ups and downs with that. When something like that happens, it can become incapacitating to the point where the person that I know, my wife dealing with that, could not even talk to her family on the phone. It was so anxious, debilitating for her to even communicate with anybody. And so for her, she couldn't do anything creative or not creative. But for you, in your experience, it was sort of a therapeutic escape. I just want to understand this so that people can maybe relate.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a way to deal with the pent up emotions that I had, the pent up, the frustrations that I was dealing with, the lack of output, because I wasn't writing. Writing my second book was incredibly hard. Writing any second book is incredibly hard in a series, but at the time I was brand new to mental illness.
Yeah.
And I was shutting down, and a lot of it was, at the time I was diagnosed with OCD, and I don't know if I still have OCD. They're still debating that. Yeah. But it was very much these obsessive thoughts of, I have to do this. I have to create this big, crazy thing. And my office, I pushed my desk off, or my computer off to the side of the desk, and I just worked on this thing until it was done. And when it was done, I started working on a whole new giant project that was 4 feet tall, and it was a mountain that had a steampunk refinery built into it, and I've gotten that under control now. I dabbled with it for a long time. I paint miniatures, but I'm not a good miniature painter. There is a amount of detail and skill that goes into painting miniatures that I don't have. But when I was in high school and early college, I worked for a theater. And I was actually apprenticed to be the art director for the theater.
Cool. So
the plan is that he would retire when I was about 22, and I would take over for him, and then I would be the art director for the theater. But when I was about 18 and a half, he got heart cancer, died very suddenly within 3 weeks. And they had to hire a new art director. And so that whole plan of me being art director went out the window. But what I had was this whole new set of skills, which involved carving foam, which has been a huge part of building things. Carving foam, building things out of spackle and modeling clay and paint that hides a multitude of sins. And so lately what I've been working on I have a miniatures game that I play, that I don't play, that I paint, a miniatures game that I play that is World War II, and I have been making display boards that are 20 inches by 40 inches. One of them is Normandy, and one of them is North Africa. And I'm now in a position where my brain is under control, so it's not as obsessive and dangerous. And by dangerous, I mean, I used to blow so much money on this. I would go to the hardware store and spend $150 and come back with every little bit and bob of whatever. Or
because it might be useful for who knows what wall or what.
Exactly. Exactly, little lengths of pipe or little fittings that I thought would be interesting, or I would get on Amazon and buy little pieces of scatter terrain, and it was dangerous from a money management standpoint, which put our family in some dire straits for a while, and I freely admit that, and we've fortunately got it under control. But it has been a huge blessing to have that as a creative outlet where I can focus on creating something, having a finished product that I can look at. I post all the pictures online so that I get positive reinforcement, and I can enjoy it without it taking over my life and ruining my financial situation.
I think that's awesome that you recognize that A, you love to do it, B, you don't think that you're that good or perfect at it, which I think we can talk about that, but then C, you're constantly putting things out there to help yourself stay motivated and positive. I think that's fascinating. And I've seen these figures, and we can put some pictures there in this, the links, the show notes to show people. But there's a level of, I know I'm not good at it, but it's good enough. I think that is one thing that people that are producing anything are sort of afraid of, right? They feel like it has to be perfect, whether it's a story or a piece of art or something like that.
Yeah. And that comes from the theater background. And it's why, like, I've dabbled several times with the idea of starting a YouTube channel, because there's so many YouTube channels that I watch that are about building terrain and building wargaming terrain or painting miniatures.
Yeah.
And I've dabbled with that before because I love the idea of having a YouTube channel. I've had a YouTube channel for a long time that dealt with mental illness issues. But the reason that I don't is because it goes back to the theater. What I learned in the theater was that you do a good enough job so that it looks real from 60 feet away in the seats.
Yeah.
So if the carving is not perfect, if the painting is not perfect, as long as it looks right from 60 feet away in the seats. I mean, for example, one of the projects that I worked on while I was in the theater was it was for the production The King and I. And I was creating this elaborate stool, and it was supposed to be inlaid and highly detailed carved.
Yeah.
And instead of that, the carving, in quotation marks, was me with a hot glue gun laying out a design on the sides of this stool, because from far away, that would look like an intricate carving.
Yeah.
And that is the way that I approach miniatures and creating my wargame terrain, is that, yes, if you're up close, if you know what you're doing, if you are another hobbyist, you will say, well, you got this wrong, and you got this wrong, and you got this wrong. I am concerned with, what does it look like when you're standing back 5 feet from it, and you're looking down, you're not right up close. Can I get it done? Can I be happy with it? Will it look good on the side table as a display piece instead of looking good with a magnifying glass?
Yeah, like a museum piece that you're going to stand up close to.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. That's fascinating. I think I've experienced that on a Universal Studios tour, the TV show The Good Place. There was a set of the train station, I think, or maybe it was a part of their downtown city area. But they were cheap plastic leaves in a planter. Like, it was obvious that it was basically stagecraft.
Yeah.
But with the camera and the distance and the focal length and all that other, the focus on it, it's not as fancy as it looks, really. Yeah. That is cool. I think for people who are trying to accomplish something, whether it is starting a YouTube channel or writing, myself included, we will have days where we are on fire. We feel like we're going in the right direction. But then something will happen, or maybe a day goes by, or maybe it's just a bad day, period, and there's no real reason why, and we feel like we're not good enough, or we're doing it wrong, or we're going in the wrong direction, or that last 2 days that I spent doing this was a waste because I got to start all over. What is that experience like for you? How do you stay positive and productive dealing with what you have expressed so far?
I stay positive and productive in a couple of ways. I take on projects that I know that I can do. I push myself on them. So I'm not staying in my safe zone. I'm doing things that I've never done before, but I know my limitations. And if I'm doing something that is done to relax, then I'm not going to push myself to create a museum piece.
Yeah.
I could tell you all my unhealthy behaviors.
Well, I guess
the healthy behaviors are a little harder to come by.
I guess that one description of recognizing, categorizing what it is that you're working on. If it's family time, it's family time.
Yeah.
And if it's a hobby to relax, if I'm not relaxing, then this is not what I should be doing right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There are hobbies that I do that, I'll just give you an example. I got this idea that I was going to put this new hobby project on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got really obsessed with that. I filmed probably 3 hours worth of footage of me laying out the design concept
Mm-hmm.
and laying down all the first bits of foam that I was going to cut and mold. And then I got into the video production aspect, which I know nothing about.
Yeah, that's a big project on its own.
And as I was getting into it, I was realizing the deeper I get into this, the more money I'm going to be investing in this. And I'm still going to have that steep learning curve once I spend the money to get a video editor. So I said, you know what? I am just going to... Well, and my wife sat me down and she said, Rob, I know you. Tell me honestly, are you thinking of monetizing this? Because she knows that I can't do anything without monetizing it.
Yeah.
I struggle a lot because I've always been paranoid about money. And I think a lot of that is my schizophrenia. I think a lot of that is just my generalized anxiety disorder. I think a lot of it is the fact that I made it through the Great Recession and spent a year and a half unemployed. And so when I get a hobby, I immediately think, well, what way can I turn this hobby into money?
Yeah.
And so she sat me down and she said, are you doing this because you love it? Or are you doing this because you think it can earn you money? And to be honest, I was thinking, I think it could earn me money.
Yeah.
And then we talked about, well, will it really? Look at the hobby channels that are making money doing this. Are you on par with them? Granted, they started from nothing and they got better as they went. But are you looking for a quick fix for an immediate problem?
Yeah.
And I was. So as much as part of my goal was to share this craft project with the world, another niggling part of it was, well, what if I create a hobby channel that I can put on Patreon and get supporters and have people pay for, and I can earn a side income that way. And once she sat me down, which she has to do a lot, and said, let's think about this rationally. What are your goals for this? Why are they your goals for this? What is realistic? What is unrealistic? I was able to get back on track and do it for the love of doing it.
Yeah. Thank heavens for wives who
Yes.
know us well enough to say, I think you're going in the wrong direction, or is this really what you want, or whatever. They just know.
Yeah.
That is cool. But she's supportive other than that, right? Like she's totally willing to help you. And it's interesting because part of it is just the enjoyment of it. Part of it is coping with issues. I think that's one thing that is kind of difficult to admit, is that we're all dealing with something. And we're all trying to find ways to cope with it without causing more problems, I guess.
Yeah.
So you've written a lot. You're really into painting and doing miniature work, model work. And I've fallen into the same thing. We think, how can we monetize this? How can we make this worth it? When really it's just an intrinsic value thing. It's just for me and my well-being. What advice would you give to anybody, whether they're a teenager dealing with any kind of mental illness, anxiety, maybe relationship issues, maybe parental issues, or adults who are finally realizing that it's okay to talk about the things that we're struggling with? What advice would you give a person when they feel like that there is something that could help them, whether it's writing or creating, but they're dealing with somebody who's telling them no, or they don't understand? Maybe parents don't understand what they're dealing with.
Number one advice would be start on the cheap. People who are telling you not to do stuff are generally not going to be upset if you are drawing on a legal pad.
Yeah.
If you are building models out of the scraps that you have. And honestly, most of the materials that I build models out of are sand that comes out of the sandbox outside.
Mm-hmm.
I buy some XPS foam, which is insulation that you can get for $14 a sheet
Mm-hmm.
at the hardware store. Toothpicks are a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Elmer's glue. I mean, these are not expensive things.
Yeah.
So do it on the cheap. There are ways that you can spend so much money.
Yeah.
And I think that is where you're going to run into more trouble convincing your family and your loved ones to get on board with it. But a notebook with note paper, a set of cheap watercolors, paint is not expensive if you buy little tubes at the craft store, and you can do amazing things with little tubes at the craft store.
Mm-hmm.
I buy expensive paints for my miniatures, but for my modeling, I buy the $1 tube of whatever acrylic at Michael's.
Yeah.
So do it on the cheap, and you're going to get a lot less pushback. I would also say try to get them on board with it as a coping technique.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for example, my daughter has OCD.
Mm-hmm.
She has a YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
which is very successful. She has 20,000 followers.
Wow.
It is her full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
is this YouTube channel. And we were reluctant at first when she started it. Well, at first she started it with no interest in monetizing it.
Yeah, it was just
Something that she loved doing.
Yeah.
And now she's getting ready to go to college into film, so this has prepared her for that.
Yeah.
But we basically came up with the value proposition that she could make more money doing YouTube videos than she could working her job at the grocery store.
Yeah.
When we were able to which granted, it's taken her 5 years to get there.
Right. It wasn't an instant next weekend kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When she was able to quit and focus on that, she put so much effort into it, and it is so good for her brain to do it. So if you can get people on board with your hobbies as therapeutic devices,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my wife knows that sometimes there are times where I just need to shut the door and paint.
Yeah.
Or there are times where I just need to shut the door and write.
Yeah.
And she will, I mean, for example, like most holidays, I don't really celebrate holidays other than to have the day off.
Mm-hmm.
Memorial Day, 4th of July, I don't go to parties.
Mm-hmm.
For one thing, with schizophrenia, it makes it difficult to socialize.
Mm-hmm.
But also, that is a free day where I can relax and unwind. She recognizes the value in that I'm relaxing and unwinding. And we're able to come to an agreement that it is better for all of us if I don't go to that picnic at the park.
Yeah. That is good that there's that openness and communication. And there's probably been situations where that wasn't the case, which led to the understanding, right?
Yeah.
With your daughter's YouTube, and I just wanted to point this out, she probably didn't start with much more than her cell phone recording.
No. Yeah, she started with a, I can't remember what her first phone was, but we bought her when she was, I mean, she's 18 now. We bought her when she was probably 12.
Mm-hmm.
This was before cell phones had good cameras, or at least cheap cell phones had good cameras.
Yeah.
So we bought her $100 camera phone, not a camera phone, just $100 camera.
Mm-hmm.
And she made videos that her videos were acting out the Hunger Games with Littlest Pet Shop figures.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize what she was doing until a neighbor came over and was like, "Hey, I saw your daughter on Facebook or on YouTube."
Yeah.
And she had 800,000 views.
Wow.
And we're like, what?
That's cool. So just a side piece of advice, $100 camera 6 years ago.
6 years ago.
Yeah, that's definitely affordable now. Whatever the camera quality is that you can get for $100 is definitely better than what it was that time ago.
Oh, yeah.
So that's awesome. What kind of encouragement did that give her? I guess maybe we should just talk to her, have an interview with her.
Yeah.
But what was that like as a parent?
It was awesome. We loved it. We loved that she was getting so involved in it. She would spend her money on it. She, because they were all Littlest Pet Shop based, she would save up her money that she got from YouTube, which wasn't very much at the time, but she would save it up, and then she would buy special characters off of eBay. She would buy paint, and she would repaint the models. She spent a little bit of money on some video editing software, but I mean, starting out, her video editing software was, I mean, extremely crude. It was like the free software that you get on your computer.
Yeah.
But she was just determined to do it, and we didn't even realize she was doing it until, I mean, we knew she was outside playing.
Yeah.
We didn't realize that she was making all these videos and
That's
becoming
neat.
a YouTube star.
That is awesome. So it's just been fascinating talking with you about knowing how severe mental illness can be, knowing the pressure of wanting to do something but not knowing how to start, or not knowing if it's doable, publishing a book. Any advice for parents that might be listening who know that they have kids that are doing something but they don't understand it, they don't get it?
Generally speaking, if your kid, and now obviously the caveat, all kids are different, all situations are different.
Sure.
But if your kid is investing time in a hobby that is non-destructive, meaning it's not, your hobby isn't vandalism, wall art, aka Banksy kind of, that kind of thing.
Or anything that could be illegal or morally...
Yeah, illegal or wrong.
Yeah.
But if they are obsessed with the guitar, embrace the guitar.
Yeah.
If they're obsessed with painting, embrace the painting and encourage them to do it, because it may not be a career. And I know that a lot of parents think in terms of, is this going to lead my child to a full-time job? Is this going to get them into college?
Right.
It may not, but it teaches them discipline.
Mm-hmm.
It teaches them entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
It teaches them mental health coping techniques, which every kid needs. I mean, the more that I am getting involved with the mental illness community, the more I see that nearly everybody really ought to be seeing a therapist.
Yeah.
And everybody is struggling with something. I mean, my wife was diagnosed at age 38 with ADHD, and it changed her life when she got on medication for ADHD medicine.
Yeah.
You never know what a kid is struggling with, and if they have a creative outlet that helps them cope with the behaviors and impulses that they have, then it's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. You might feel like maybe they're developmentally behind, or maybe they're obsessing too much on something. Just as an example, I have a son who's almost 14 who has discovered the DuckTales graphic novel-like comic books that basically go along with the TV show. And a lot of kids at 14 have moved on to something else. But if that's what he loves, if he loves that story, or if he loves that artwork or whatever, that's what he's into. There shouldn't be anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing with my 11-year-old son. He's 11 years old. He is just about to start 6th grade. His favorite toys in the world are plushies.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take that away from him. If that is what he wants to dedicate his time to, he's going to face bullies at school who get in his face about the fact that he loves plush animals.
Yeah.
But that's what he loves doing, and there's nothing that should stand in the way of him doing it.
Yeah. I think that's a healthy parenting advice. We worry about our kids, we worry about their success, we worry about their well-being and whether or not they have friends. But if they have something that they can feel safe in, I think, and enjoy themselves, and that it's not silly or wrong or whatever, but like you said, everyone's scenario is different, everyone's situation is different. Well, Rob, I really appreciate the time that you've taken today to talk with me and how open you've been. It really helps me to see how people can be successful in dealing with pretty difficult things. Just one last question that I want to add here. The name of the podcast is Own Your Good. What does that phrase mean to you with your hobbies and your skills and your talents?
I would say embrace what you're good at. Don't try to pound a square peg into a round hole. Embrace the things that you love and be open to new opportunities that come from those passions and projects. I mean, just don't be afraid of anything that brings you joy. If it brings you joy and it is true joy, not a manufactured, the joy of spending money or the joy of something salacious, but if it is true joy, then there's nothing wrong with that. And own it and embrace it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that's a difficult question to sort of wrap your head around, but I feel like that's 100% right. I hope that people listening will take your example for how you deal with life and how you pursue your things and owning your good. So thanks so much for talking with me today. This is Dave with Own Your Good.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today on Own Your Good. I'd like to give a special thanks to Arches Audio. They are the ones that provided this awesome music. If you need anything for a project, I would go and check them out. They have a great selection of music and other services to help you with your creative projects. I hope that you found this valuable. If you enjoyed this episode and it did something for you, or you think somebody might benefit from it, please share this. It would mean a lot to me to help spread this positivity and this idea that people can change, improve, and ultimately own their good.